it was not simple, just like anything in my life. But yeah, I guess that same question you asked about how I convinced Atomic to give me my own ski and graphic, I once again, the only answer I really have is I'm speaking from a place of true passion, and like I'm not willing to sacrifice, whether it's make more money or anything. Like if I have a passion project or an idea in mind, which I will call my ski and my graphics that too, it's I I will figure out any way to make it possible. And I guess I must have somewhat of a knack for selling my sponsors on that.
That is Chris Benchetler this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey, my friend, welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian, and this is my podcast. Thanks for stopping by, or thanks for coming back. I am really looking forward to sharing this interview with you. This is an interview that I have been excited about for a very, very long time. But before we get into today's guest, I just have a quick favor to ask of you. Something that is super easy, but something that is going to help me out a ton. If you could, just take a minute. Please leave a review on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app it is you are using to listen to this podcast. Something very small, but it's something that is definitely going to help me out so much. So if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. My guest this week is Chris Benchetler. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast that know me well, you know how much of a fan I am of Chris Benchetler. I have been following Chris for quite some time, almost immediately. As I got into skiing, I discovered Chris. And Chris is a professional skier, but he's also an artist. He's a director. He's a surfer. Chris has a very long list of accolades, and he is pretty amazing at all of the above. But his primary two focuses, maybe we'll say three, would be his skiing, his art, and his films. And that's what we really get a chance to talk about on today's episode. And Chris has been doing it for himself since he got into the ski industry. And we'll talk about his first deal when he went from K2 to Atomic and how he structured that. And it was all about something that he wanted. It wasn't about the money. It was about something that he wanted to be able to do. And then we get into his project Chasing Adventure, and we get into his most recent project, Fire on the Mountain, which is an absolutely amazing video that is now live on YouTube. You can check it out. All you have to do is pop in Fire on the Mountain. If you are a ski or surf fan, you will love it. If you are a Grateful Dead fan, you will love it. If you're at home, just hanging out, quarantined, it's definitely a great watch. So, like I said, this week we get into Chris's story. I'm really looking forward to sharing this. It's an interview that we've been trying to work out for a while now, and it just so happened that it just worked out one afternoon, and we were able to get it done. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Chris Benchetler. If you're ready to get going.
Yeah, totally.
All right, awesome. Well, this is a really exciting episode, and for the people who have already listened to the intro, they're going to know who is on the other end of this conversation. But we were just talking, and this is a conversation that I've really wanted to have for a long time, and it's a conversation that I'm very, very excited about. So, Chris, thanks so much for joining me this afternoon on the show, and working through some of the technical issues with me, and getting back on Skype, which I'm sure you haven't used in a little while.
No, no problem at all. I'm happy to be here, and yeah, stoked to connect with you.
So, are you up in Mammoth right now, or are you in Southern California?
I am in Mammoth, luckily, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. We have a very, small, close community with a lot of second homeowners and a small hospital. So I think I just heard that Mono County, which Mammoth is in, is the most affected county of COVID in all of California. So yeah, I mean, I'm from here and happy to be here and wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But I do know a lot of people are kind of making their way up here to quote unquote get in nature for their social distancing.
And as far as getting in nature, what does that mean for Mammoth Resort? Are they shut down right now?
They are, yeah. From my understanding, or I don't know of any ski resorts that are still spinning chairlifts, but yeah, all of the Alterra group and um, but yeah, pretty much everyone I know is shut down indefinitely, and they're hopeful. I mean, we've been having an insane March, of course. That it was a pretty slow, poor season after December, and then it's just kicked back full swing into winter. And so I know the mountain is clearly sad, and a lot of the people that come to ski up here are sad, but I'm hopeful all this stuff and people get get through the health issues, and it's a trying time for sure, but yeah, I hope it's all relatively quick and life can get back to normal.
Yeah, I mean, I saw, that I think Jackson is closed, like, indefinitely, like, they just closed for the season, and, like, the day after they announced it, they got dumped on up there, and it's just, like,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking, but it's one of those things, it's a very difficult decision that people have to make right now, but, it's something that they have to do.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, that's the communication from my understanding of Mammoth and all the Alterra resorts is they are closed indefinitely, but if things drastically change for the better, I think I'm sure most of the ski resorts will reconsider opening back up, especially considering we've had a nice little run of storms here.
And so, we're talking about skiing and all these different resorts. Let's get into kind of your career as a skier. You started off at a young age as a ski racer, and then you kind of made your way into the park, and then really into the backcountry scene, and that's what you're known for now. So, talk to me a little bit about how you got into skiing. I know your family was big into the outdoors, and how that kind of blossomed your passion for being on the mountain.
Yeah, I think I was just a product of circumstance, if that makes sense. I was really lucky. My dad found Mammoth in the early '70s, and then so did my mom. And she's a I wouldn't call her an avid skier, or in my lifetime, anyways. She was always a fair weather skier, but they met up here in the '70s and never left. And then they moved down to Bishop, which is just 45 minutes south of here, down in the valley, and did they rode cutting horses and did some ranch type things. We had 5 acres out in Chalfont, and then when we were born, my brother and I, they sold all the horses, got back into skiing, and then so I was just raised going to the mountain every weekend, and my dad was extremely passionate about it. And then by the time I was racing, he he was a volunteer host, so just kind of one of those. I'm sure most resorts have them, but he would help lost people or point people in the right direction, and kind of like a low level ski patrol, I guess you could say. And just so he can support my passion for skiing and my brother's passion for snowboarding. And then he passed away when I was 16, and we moved back up to Mammoth, and I've been here ever since and plan on staying for the rest of my life and raising my family here.
Yeah, and so I think a couple things that I want to touch on there. You said your brother's a snowboarder and you're a skier. How did that come about? What pulled you to skiing versus snowboarding?
Honestly, I think it was just timing more than anything. He grew up with this really talented snowboarder named John Jackson.
Mhm.
They were basically best friends. So John used to come on all our family trips every summer and was just always around. And so I was heavily influenced and raised by snowboarders. And then when my brother did move out, even before my dad had passed, he was living with Matt Hammer, who was another really incredible snowboarder. And John and Matt used to be kind of opener and closer of all the standard films for many years. And so I just, yeah, I grew up watching snowboard films, and my brother had those friends and those inspirations, and I was transitioning and getting more and more over the structure of racing right at the same time twin tips were invented. And there was a few people. There's a local kid, Rory Silva, who was the first person I ever saw ski switch off a jump or anything. And so he was starting to kind of mimic what the snowboarders were doing. And then that same time, when I would have switched, like right as I was quitting racing, is when Pep Fugis and Tanner Hall and all those dudes were living here. And I met Pep and through Rory, and just yeah, was really inspired with that movement. And that was pre 1242, which I don't know how how many of your fans follow skiing, but that's like an old Oakley movie that was pretty game changing for a lot of skiers. And yeah, it just all of the timing of all of that really made me stick with skiing and had no reason to learn another sport.
And as a kid who was racing, you know, over here on the East Coast, we don't necessarily get too many amazing powder days. You know, for us to get a powder day, that's like it's almost like 100-year flood, right? Like it doesn't happen very often. And I mean, listen, we're very grateful for the days that we do get, and we can go out and ski some of the soft stuff. But most of the time, we're skiing hard packed groomers. So for racers or for the just regular skier, there's not much of a difference. But, as a kid, you're skiing out on the West Coast and there's plenty of POW days out there sometimes, depending on the season. But it's got to be tough standing in line, waiting your turn to go ski gates when there's people who you can probably see right next to you who are just out ripping around in POW and having an amazing, amazing time. Not that the skiing gates wasn't an amazing time for you, but you had to
Yeah.
be looking over at these people like basically having free reign of this powder day and you're skiing gates.
Oh, totally. And that's, I mean, the amount of times I got made fun of for being in my downhill suit by John and my brother and all those guys as they're ripping around was enough to help me get over ski racing. And unfortunately, well, fortunately for ski racers now, or at least the West Coast ones, like I think seeing seeing that there is career potential outside of ski racing, because at that point in time it was such a new genre of skiing. It wasn't seen as anything other than yeah, I mean, I don't even know what it was seen as by my coaches and stuff, but I distinctly remember my race coaches telling me that if I was throwing away my career and all these things if I was going to quit ski racing. And I just had to follow my heart and follow my passion. And I've kind of based my whole life off of that same mentality of just being true, super authentic to myself, and believing that I do what I want to do for the right reasons, even though I'm sure a lot of times I do them for the wrong reasons. But try to live in that mentality and just listen to my heart and my soul. And so yeah, I mean, it was, to answer your question, it was not easy to be running gates. And back then, they were way more strict. Whereas now, it seems like the ski racers growing up around here, all the coaches have seen me and a number of other athletes, kind of make something out of skiing the mountain and realize the strength it gives you to be able to read the mountain and ski it super strongly. And it's only going to help improve your racing. I think Darren Rolfs is a incredible example of that. Someone who grew up skiing a lot of mixed and variable terrain and brought that to a race course, and still the only American to ever win the Hahnenkamm downhill that I know of. So yeah, I think it's just a shift in mentality that happened after enough coaches saw the potential that the mountains and the jumps and all of these things offer you. Whereas when I was a kid, it was more of taboo.
And that actually then transitions you into following your brother and some of these guys into the park, and you're skiing park, and that's talk about taboo. I mean, going from ski racing to being a park rat,
Yeah,
like
totally.
that's like completely taboo. But was it your brother that really pulled you into the park, or was it some of these other outside influences? You saw people, skiing twin tips, skiing switch, going off a jump switch, and it was just something that you were really, really attracted to.
Yeah, I think it was a blend of it all, because videos were just like, I think the first time, I saw one of John's video parts, he would have been only like 15. So that would have made me, my brothers, yeah, I think they're 3 years older than me. So I would have been like 12 when I saw one of John's first video parts. So seeing him, and that was pretty park focused at that time, and seeing all of those guys hit all the jumps, and Mammoth was, that's why I said earlier it was just a culmination of the times, really. It was everything happening all at once. Like, Mammoth Terrain Park was one of the best in the nation, or maybe globally, I don't even know, but I remember, like, Candide Tovex used to come and train here every season, Yoon Olsen, all these people that I ended up looking up to a lot later, but at that time, I didn't even know who they were. I just kind of looked up to the snowboarders because they were directly in my life. And then as I pursued skiing, I looked more to skiers, I guess. I still look to the snowboarders for influence, but yeah, to answer your question, I think it was just a mixture of my brother and everyone, and the times and the jumps, and just everything was super inspiring.
But how do you go from making the transition to skiing in the park to then skiing in the backcountry and doing some of these huge lines and heli trips and some of the stuff that you're doing now? Because that's a big transition too. I mean, skiing the whole mountain is one thing, and being able to ski in the park and hit jumps is a skill that's going to transition. But I mean, we're talking about going from, groomers to the back country in a heli. That's a huge difference. So how did that transition happen?
I think it was natural, really. I had the opportunity to film with Poor Boys, like, pretty quickly, just because I had met Pep, and he introduced me to K2. I got sponsored. All of it happened relatively fast. The timeline was just a rapid timeline, and I was never that competitive of a person. I'm super, super driven and competitive with myself. Like, I'm a perfectionist to some degree. Every sport I do, I wish I did it 1,000 times better, including skiing. But I just, I think it was just natural, really. Like, Poor Boys told me, they're like, "Hey, do you have a snowmobile or access to a snowmobile? We're doing a trip to Montana." And so I can't even remember how I afforded it at the time. I was living with my mom, obviously. She might have helped me out, but I was just like, "Yep, I have a snowmobile." And so I just went and bought one and taught myself as quickly as possible, just because I didn't want to miss the opportunity or lie or say that I didn't know what I was doing. But I just kind of jumped headfirst in because I was so passionate about skiing, and skiing the mountain was always just as inspiring to me as skiing the park. So they really went hand in hand. And then that progression takes you into bigger and bigger mountains, and then that obviously was a massive learning curve. And I'm still learning. There's people that are far more skilled at skiing big lines than I am, but I try to ski them in a way that once again is authentic to me and my personality. If I'm more willing to do a lot of turns and look for features everywhere down the slope versus a lot of pro skiers that want to go straight and fast and big as
Mhm.
possible.
Mhm.
So it's all relative, I guess, to how you ski it and how you see it.
And as you were coming up through the ranks, you were working with still some big name companies at the time. You had a sponsor, K2, and that was your ski sponsor, and you made this shift. And I think through listening to some of the other podcasts that you've done, this was kind of the first maybe iteration of making a professional decision that was based off of your gut and something that you really wanted to do, aside from making this transition from, ski racing to the park to the backcountry. This switch and this move away from K2 was something that was really a really professional decision and a career decision that you needed to make. And so you were with K2, and K2 was like a family for you. And after having a great season, you were approached by Atomic, and Atomic wanted to work out a deal with you, but you were hesitant, one, to leave K2 because of this family atmosphere that you had, but you made an offer, or I guess maybe a counter offer, to Atomic and said, "Listen, this is what I want, and, if you guys wanna do that, great, then, we can make this deal, but if not, um, sorry, it's just not gonna work." And with that deal, you were almost you weren't almost, I mean, you were shooting for the stars with the deal, but were you almost hoping that they would say no, or were you gonna be disappointed? I mean, were you gonna be disappointed if they did say no?
I don't think so, because yeah, nice homework. Yeah, for sure. That's pretty much how it all unraveled. But this guy Jordan Judd, luckily was the marketing manager at Atomic at that point, and Eric Pollard, who is a good friend of mine and was becoming an even better friend at that point. That's right when we were starting Nimbus. Um, I'd skied an Idea when I was still on K2, and then that next year I was switching to Atomic. So Jordan had worked with Line and worked with Pollard before, and so he had nothing but good things to say. And so I had a lot of trust in Jordan, and he was over here on the west coast, like in the States, and communicating back to Austria. And there's absolutely nothing against the Austrians. I mean, my father's from Budapest. My heritage is Austria-Hungary, but they just, at that point in time particularly, saw things differently than what was actually happening on the ground over here. And so I had a lot of trust in Jordan. I had a lot of trust in friends. I mean, I talked to Anthony Bornowski, who's an old skier pal of mine, and I talked to JP Auclair a lot, and a lot of these people that weren't on K2, because I didn't want a skewed or biased decision. Like I was leaving my family of Pep and Mare and Pettit and all these guys that I'd grown up skiing with and really liked a lot, but I was also trying to make the best decision for my career.
Mhm.
And I didn't know at the time, like, obviously, I think that you'll learn that through this podcast is I tend to just go for it without really thinking things all the way through. Like if I'm really passionate about something. And so at that time, I wasn't a self-proclaimed artist or had really done any art outside of doodling on my homework. But I was like, yeah, I want my own ski. I had seen success with Pep, and later saw how much success Pollard had, and actually we can talk about that too, like just subconsciously how much Pollard has inspired me and how dang similar we are as people, which I didn't realize at the time I was switching, but after the fact I'm like, oh wow, I'm sure I was just like subconsciously learning from Pollard's ways the whole time, his ski design and his art and his filmmaking and all of these things that I do now that was never my intended path necessarily. But yeah, it's like I yeah, so to answer your question once again, sorry I tend to talk a little too much, but I basically I basically just knew that the skis that Atomic had and the image that they had were nothing that I resonated with, or they weren't how I saw myself in the industry, especially being so inspired by snowboarding. And so I had nothing to lose by asking for all these things. Like I asked for a rocket ski, I asked for my own ski, all of these things that at the time they just didn't have another option, I guess. Like
Mhm.
they he built the team with Sage and Durchy and all these people at the same time.
Mhm.
So of course those people are equally talented and could have maybe done the same thing for Atomic, maybe not, hard to say, you know. I mean, it's kind of all dependent on a vision and a work ethic, but regardless, yeah, it was just it felt it felt like I had nothing to lose, but if they gave me what I wanted, I felt like I could truthfully and authentically create something that people would actually um, resonate with.
The question that I wanted to ask you about that and about your why behind wanting to design your own ski, and I don't mean the graphics of the ski. I mean actually design the construction of the ski. What is the benefit for you versus the amount of work that could potentially go into that, and why is that something that was so interesting to you versus, there's a ton of pros who are skiing for Atomic. You just listed off a bunch, but the one that comes to mind for me is Tim Durchy, and he's skiing your pro model skis. And so, just to be a pro skier, you don't necessarily have to design your own skis, but why was that something that you were just so passionate about?
I think I just have a either a flaw or I don't know entirely what it is, but I'm really I don't know how to articulate this very well, but I'm just like hung up on my vision and my ideas a little bit. And I learned later that I guess I have a knack for testing skis. Like they would blindly test me samples or send me samples of flex patterns that were so marginally like the tiniest bit different in the tail or the tip, and I could always sniff out which one I wanted, you know, like, hey, I want number two, which I feel is like more responsive and softer. Like, I guess it was really sensitive to the flex patterns because I liked buttering so much and because I was so inspired by surfing and I liked turning so much that I really like my tails to release and to turn a certain way. And I really like the ski to feel pretty special. And so I think my passion for all of that and how I guess how I was communicating it to Atomic was a good enough sales pitch to make me seem like I really knew knew what I wanted and what I was talking about. Because I'm no ski engineer and I could have never made anything remotely close to the skis I've made without all the engineers at Atomic. You know, they're so talented and there's such a massive product team and people that really trust me and really work with me closely. And so it's absolutely a group effort. But and I've never even asked Durchy that question, or and I know Sage is super sensitive and able to ski test incredible, and so is Rolf, all these people. But I guess I was outspoken and passionate enough about it early on where they didn't have another option. So my timing once again was just perfect.
And it could
Yeah.
be I was gonna say, it could be like Tim might not have the interest in doing that. Tim might be super down with testing out a bunch of different skis and flex patterns and seeing, what he likes and giving his feedback, but he might not want to sit down via Skype or something with the design team and actually go through the CAD models and look at it. It just might not be something that's of interest to him, you know?
Yeah, 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 highly possible for sure. And yeah, I just once again, I think it was an authentic passion that I have, and Atomic could see that, and the team of people could see that. So it just worked out.
And aside from designing the ski itself, the construction of the ski, you've had over 10 years worth of graphics that you've gotten a chance to put out on this powder ski. And it's been everything from my favorite piece of yours, Old Man Winter, you've had on a ski all the way up through this year's design, which I've seen a bunch of early pictures of, which also looks absolutely amazing. But the thing that I've noticed through all of the designs is that it seems like your art inspiration comes from what you see around you while you're out skiing on the mountain or in mother nature and you're rock climbing or mountain biking and doing these activities that you're doing day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm directly influenced by my surroundings and activities and being out in nature are certainly my happy place. And, it's I've I yeah, I 100% draw inspiration from the Sierra, like the trees around here, the bristlecones in particular, and the mountains, the really sharp mountain ranges of the minarets, and just yeah, everywhere I climb, everywhere I ski, and everything, I'm just constantly taking in information, whether knowing it or not, and I tend to bring that back to my art and translate it onto wood or canvas, or even I've done some digital stuff obviously for graphics. And so whatever the medium ends up being, it's all stemmed from being outside.
And I actually wanted to ask you about that because when they do graphics for skis, I'm assuming it has to be done digitally. So can you draw something on canvas or on paper or on wood and then send that to them? I mean, we'll get into what you did with the van. Obviously, I know that they can do it if you're going to wrap something, but is it the same for the top sheets and the bottoms of the skis?
Yeah, so most of my skis are actual just scans of my art,
Okay.
and if it's a large format piece, like I paint on big 8-foot sheets of plywood a lot. I'll have a buddy with a good camera, Christian Pondella, who I shoot a lot of photos with, who lives in town here. He usually shoots them all for me, and he'll bring his tripod and any necessary lighting or whatever and shoot it. So there's no void, or I don't know if that's the right word, but so there's no warp in the
Mhm.
image itself. And then yeah, we just crop it and it's high enough res that it can be translated to whatever, either base or top sheet, and then that the sublimation process and all of that. But on some of those graphics, like some of the line drawings and things, I can now use an iPad, which is immediately vectorized, which makes it much easier to work with from a graphic standpoint. So
Mhm.
it really just depends on what I'm trying to make the graphic look like. But a majority, a majority of them are all hand drawn.
So I want to kind of like make a little bit of a shift and get into some of the projects aside from the projects of designing your own skis, but some of the video projects and some of the video parts and things that you've done, because I would assume that you made a shift when everything else started to make a shift because there was the old school days of Warren Miller films that you were, getting on Blu-ray, DVD, probably even some of the very, very early days VHS. And, there was this transition that happened where things were obviously available online. And then with that you have things that are now available places like YouTube or some of the stuff from TGR is available right on their website and you don't have to pay for it anymore. And so these Warren Miller films that you used to have to go and buy and or rent, there's this transition happening where things are being put out and they're being put out online, but somebody, has to pay for it. So you have this idea and you've always wanted a van. Your wife, Kimmy's mom, was sick and diagnosed with cancer. She is talking about selling one of her vans, and you are like immediately all in on trying to buy it. And of course, Kimmy's like, "Yeah, no, that's not happening." But you then, of course, your wheels start to spin, and you start to figure out this way to pitch an idea to your sponsors to build a van that you're looking to build in order to travel up and down the West Coast to go surfing and skiing. S
Yep.
so, I wanna know, like, obviously, when you had the first initial call with Atomic, who's one of your sponsors now, the things that you were asking for from Atomic, they were going to benefit both you and Atomic, because Atomic was then going to have a product to sell, right? So that pitch was probably a little bit easier. But now, as we start to get into this project called Chasing Adventure, which is how I discovered you, um, how does that pitch go?
It was not simple, just like anything in my life. But yeah, I guess that same question you asked about how I convinced Atomic to give me my own ski and graphic, I once again, the only answer I really have is I'm speaking from a place of true passion. And like I'm not willing to sacrifice, whether it's make more money or anything. Like if I have a passion project or an idea in mind, which I will call my ski and my graphics that too, it's I I will figure out any way to make it possible. And I guess I must have somewhat of a knack for selling my sponsors on that, because it was, to backtrack a little bit, like we started Nimbus Independent, me, Pollard, Pep Fugis, and Andy Mayer, after they made Idea, which was a ski film. And that was kind of revolutionary for free content online. And unfortunately, that we didn't have any money, and Eric was the visionary behind that. But that was inspired from this series called Drive Through, which was like a surf TV show with Donovan Frankenreiter and a few other people, and they would just go to these waves or go wherever in the world. And it wasn't necessarily about the scoring the best waves anymore. It was like about them and their travels and just enjoying life and being authentic and true to like what it actually is. So in Nimbus, we were skiing a lot of resorts, and we were just screwing around and just being inspired by each other and making whatever work. And that formula seemed to really lay the groundwork and the foundation for my career. And like I spent 10 years doing that with Eric, and it was some of the best times of my life. And then he had a child during that time, and then he had another child, and Pep also was popping out 2 children during that time. And so that both of them had really started to slow down. Andy had a child. I was kind of the last one, and both of our filmers for Nimbus had children. So it was like, okay, everybody's starting family and leaving me behind. I'm not ready to have a kid yet, because I was the youngest out of everyone. And so that forced me to create my own, projects, really. Like I always had creative freedom with Pollard. He listened to me more than any sponsor ever would, or anything. Like he really trusted my vision, and he always had his own vision, obviously, but his own vision really jived perfectly with how I saw skiing and how I saw everything. So yeah, that leads us to like Pollard. We were doing a movie called After the Sky Falls, and he broke his leg really bad in Russia and was going to need it amputated and all these crazy things, and then had children. And everyone was like, okay, we're just taking the break. And I was like, okay, I need to figure something out. And so the year before Chasing Adventure, I had found this kid, Matt Cook, who was really good at follow cams with GoPros. He was working for GoPro at the time, which was pretty a rare perspective. And I grew up skateboarding as well, and I had always loved how skate movies had a ton of movement in all the shots. Mm-hmm. Like they would always roll on their skateboards like a dolly. And I was like, oh, so that'd be kind of sick to do something, because Matt had done a GoPro trip with Travis Rice and I and got some insane footage. So I was like, okay, let's pitch an idea to GoPro. So I did that. I did a 4-part series called Chasing El Nino. It was right when we had come out of the drought in California. Mm-hmm. And then, so with the success of Nimbus, with the success of Chasing El Nino and all of these different things, I had a lot of a weight, I guess, or I had like good footing to stand on with my sponsors. I was like, okay, here's a direct measurement of success, and here's my concept, and van life is just starting to like get on the map. I've always wanted a van. I've always wanted to selfishly, go post up in Mexico and do really live out of a van to simplify my life a bit and just see if I could do it for one, but see the places I go all the time, but in a much slower manner, essentially. Like really take the time to live in a spot and just and see the snow cycles happening, see everything changing, and just live out of a van for a year. And of course, that all came at a crazy time in life. As you mentioned, Kimmy's mom ended up passing away the year I was doing Chasing Adventure. So there was a moment there where I wasn't even going to do the project anymore, even though I had already committed to my friend Scott Smith, who built out the van, and I paid for the van and did all of these things. But there was a lot of challenges, as life tends to throw those at us all the time. But yeah, so I guess I'm getting a little off track here, but I don't know if I had a direct sales pitch as much as just once again my passion and yeah, I just the authenticity of what I want to accomplish is I was able to relay that to each of my supporting sponsors to give me some cash to help pay for a van and pay my friend and do all the things that we had to do to make that project happen. And a lot of people, like Scotty included, you know, gave me so much of his time. Like he didn't make any money off of that van, but I saw it as an opportunity to hopefully give him a new business model. He was so
Mhm.
talented as a finish carpenter. I was like, okay, here's my idea, Scotty. Like, are you willing to take a risk with me here in hopes that you can start building vans? And he was. And then I hit up my buddy Sky Walker, who I'd met years prior, and asked him because I'd never painted large scale, and originally I was just gonna spray paint the whole van, and then we talked about it a bit, and I was like, let's change that to a vinyl wrap so we can do this, and then yeah, it was just basically a way to show the world all the things I'm passionate about in skiing and climbing and surfing and art and turn it into a movie essentially.
And I'm sure at the time that, as you're pitching these sponsors, you had no idea what this was gonna do online. So you couldn't really tell them, "Hey, this is what it could do." I mean, to date, even the Chasing El Nino series is like some of the videos are sitting around, 500,000 views on YouTube and some of the other ones. It kind of varies, but they're all around like 300 to 500,000 views. But to date, Chasing Adventure, and I don't know if you know this or not, I just pulled it up, but Chasing Adventure has done 4.7 million views on YouTube.
Damn, I I knew it was climbing. I haven't looked at it in a while. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm beyond grateful that that many people want to sit through 30 minutes of a film of me and my friends chasing storms around. But yeah, that's insane.
And I mean, so I said at the beginning, but that's actually how I discovered you. And the reason that I discovered it is because when you start going down the rabbit hole of van life, when you put I think I was looking for van tours or something like that on YouTube, and this video popped up, and the thumbnail is a picture of you skiing, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, what does this have to do with, like" I mean, I'm into skiing, so, like, I'll click on it, and I'll check this out, but, like, where does the van thing come in? And, of course, immediately, I'm just sucked in. And so I go through and I watch that, but the other reason that I got sucked in is because there's a name and a person in there who I haven't heard the name or even, like, really went back to since I was in high school, and that's Rob Machado. So just briefly, I mean, I want you to touch on your relationship with Rob Machado because he comes back in the second project that we're going to talk about, which is your most recent project. But you actually got a lot of inspiration from him for your ski design. So talk to me a little bit about your relationship with Rob Machado.
Yeah, that is we share a few sponsors is how we met initially, and I actually just kind of reached out with the concept of chasing adventure because I he did inspire my ski shape, and when I kind of switched that horizon tech on my ski, which is that more multi-dimensional rocker in the tip and tail, was directly influenced from a board that he shaped. And so I kind of wanted to tell him about it and see if he'd be willing to shape me a board for the trip, because I'm in love with surfing, and like obviously idolize him as a surfer. He's really, from my perspective, without really knowing him, he was exactly in line with how I try to live my life, and how he's soft spoken and humble, and just had a lot of traits that he just seemed like a very respectful, awesome guy, basically, and
Mhm,
and that's
mhm.
how I was raised, and that's how I try to live my life. I'm sure some people might not think that about me, but I hope I come off in that way. And so I just reached out, kind of mentioned what I was doing. He was exactly like I thought he would be. And then I went down and we shaped the board and got to know each other, surfed together, and then really just hit it off because we are very much cut from the same cloth. And he was getting more into snowboarding. And so we kind of could had that yin and yang where I could give him some experiences in the snow and he could give me some experience in the surf. And he's just a super good human. So we've become extremely close friends since that chasing adventure year, and yeah, never really parted ways. And then I yeah, he was the first person I called, aside from my wife, for the Grateful Dead project, because I knew I wanted him involved. And um, yeah, I knew I wanted surfing in there, and he represents surfing better than anyone I could have hoped for. So that's the short of it, I guess.
And that leads us into your most recent project, which after finding Chasing Adventure, I found it well after it had been posted. And so, right around the time that I found it is when you were already talking about the Fire on the Mountain project, and you were doing your first design of Grateful Dead skis with Atomic, and so all of these things started to happen, and I was just, like, glued to Instagram and YouTube, like, waiting for this next project to come out. So, um
I appreciate you. Thank you.
and, yeah, for sure, and I'm sorry that I probably commented on a couple of your posts saying like, "Hey, when's it coming out? When's it coming out?" Like, "I can't
Oh
wait,"
no,
but
please. I appreciate any stoke and engagement
I
from anyone. That's the whole point of posting those things. If no
so
one liked it or talked about it, then there would be no real point of having social media, which
yeah.
would also be somewhat of a blessing. But that's another. That's another.
That's a whole
Uh,
episode in and of itself,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Um, so you get approached by someone at TGR because you listen to the Dead, you are a big fan of their music, and obviously you have such a reputation with designing ski graphics. And the Dead was looking at doing another iteration of a ski graphic. They had done ski I think there's a really, really old Dead ski graphic, and then obviously they had done a collaboration, with Burton on snowboards, but it had been quite some time since they did anything on skis. And so, you get the call up for the ski design, but you also had this idea for the video project, and again, you have to go to the sponsors and pitch not only the ski design, but you have to pitch this project for the video. And there were definitely some difficulties because the Dead isn't as big, overseas and specifically where Atomic is based. Um, but you have probably even more of a leg to stand on at this point after having all of these successful graphics and everything that had come out.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you want me to start? This is a complex complex web, if you will, of just how it all unfolded. But I guess I'll start with TGR. So I'd filmed with TGR in the past, just like a couple of random segments. I went
Mhm.
out to Jackson, and Atomic is their title sponsor of their annual film.
Okay.
And so I've gotten to know Steve and Todd Jones, who run TGR, and I know their brother Jeremy, who's in Fire on the Mountain.
Mhm.
And yeah, so Todd's son Kai Jones also skis for Atomic. He's a little,
Rips.
I think
He
he's
rips.
12 now or
Yeah.
whatever, but at that point he might be 13 now probably. But at that point, when he came to my house for an Atomic shoot, it was like a multi-generational thing because Kai also skis on my skis. Um, I was playing some vinyl records that we got from Kimmy's mother who passed. She had a ton of classic. I pretty much exclusively listen to classic rock and always have. So yeah, I was just listening to a Dead record, and I think we were having a couple drinks and I was strumming on the guitar. I'm quite bad, but I was playing going down the road or something. And Todd's like, "Oh my God, I'm just putting all this together. This guy, Brian Francis, who we're going to hire to run our apparel, is looking for a ski license for the Grateful Dead because Brian had worked with the Grateful Dead in the past. He had licensed some shoe brands and some other random things. He was living in New York, so he had licensed with Warner Music, and Warner reached out to Brian to help them find a ski that would align with their brand and their image, because that's like Warner's entire, or I shouldn't say Warner's entire, because I know they have they're like a whole they have a lot of other talent, musicians and stuff. But the Dead side of things, they're tasked with keeping the legacy of the Dead alive. They have so much iconic, the Steal Your Faces and the
Mhm.
Dancing Bears and all of
Mhm.
these things that people want those on products constantly. And so they're very picky with their process. And so they, like you mentioned, had a ton of success with Burton. I think they did 5 years of it, 5 different boards. And they were like, why does no one in skiing want this? And so me and Brian got introduced, and that was, yeah, the role of TGR was really nothing more than just Todd introducing them to me. And
Mhm.
then because it unfolded and they liked my idea so much, I felt indebted to give distribution to TGR. So
Okay.
that the film itself wasn't actually made by TGR. I can get into that later, but yeah, they were distribution of the film. But um yeah, so me and Brian start working together directly with the Warner team over in New York, and I give them a couple of my initial cons. Or so sorry, let me backtrack. So I then I meet Brian. I love it. I love the Dead. I'm like, yes, we're doing this. I call my my marketing manager at Atomic over in Austria, and once again, as we discussed in this podcast, they tend to believe my vision, and it's been working thus far. So they're
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
okay, let's hear him out. And I'm like, have you heard of the Grateful Dead? No. So I have to like do some homework myself and try and just like send some Wikipedia pages and send some, like just try and explain the Dead and the community and everything that they represent. Because if you don't know, it's pretty hard to explain.
Mhm.
I mean, I even know it now, and I still find it hard to articulate in such a way that's like convincing. But anyways, yeah, I end up convincing them. I think out of 30 employees, I think 2 of them had heard of the Grateful Dead before. But once again, they trust me and they trust what I've done thus far. So I start doing initial concepts for the skis, and we're just going to do a limited release and release it mid-season, and we have this whole game plan. And just the concepts artistically had so much back and forth with Warner and like everyone that has to approve the process. I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Like I'm spending all these hours and days drawing these things, and then they're like, nope, you can only you can't represent one member of the band. You gotta, represent everyone. Because at first I had Jerry's Wolf guitar like completely morphed into a tree, throughout the whole ski, which I loved. But then I later learned, they want to represent Bob and
Mhm.
Mickey and everyone, which now I totally understand and I get it. It wasn't Jerry's band, and so there was all these things I had to learn, which came at a cost of just putting a ton of time and energy into things that saw no light of day. And so I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. But for some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to pitch them my movie concept. And so I do, and they like it. And so we start going down that road, and that the complexities of music rights and everything, like I don't know how much you understand the Dead. I certainly had to learn a lot, but Warner has all the licensing to the image it like to the Steal Your Faces and all of the trademarks. And
Mhm.
then Rhino Records owns the publishing or the licensing to the music, and then Universal owns the mastering. And so yeah, I had to pitch this not only to my sponsors, but most importantly to all of these people who I was extremely underqualified. I'm on conference calls with people from Universal and Rhino Records and all of these things, and I'm like, yeah, so I'm a skier and I want to do this thing, and and so that whole process was once again, I think they saw the passion behind it and they saw the authenticness or authenticity. I don't think authenticness is a word. Sorry. They saw the authenticity of what I was trying to do, and they were like, "Okay." And so I knew at that point, just by being a fan, and I have a very very close friend that's an extreme deadhead who was helping to educate me on a lot of the behind the scenes, but I wanted Dave Lemieux, who's the legacy manager of the band and the official archivist, to be the music supervisor. So I pitched that. David was super interested. We spoke. He really liked my concept, and so yeah, I was just taking all the right steps to get people on board without really knowing that I was taking the right steps. It just unfolded well for me, I guess, and then I had to pitch Sweetgrass on the concept of lighting it, just because I'd done a project with them called Afterglow many years before. Which, if you haven't stumbled across that on YouTube, it's pretty awesome. Should check it out. But that was, yeah, such a life changing and incredible experience for me to ski at night. We were up in Alaska, and I didn't want to repeat that by any means. I wanted to take inspiration from that and create an artistic and visual journey with this Grateful Dead movie. So I, yeah, had some selling for them because they were like, there is a lot of freaking work, as you can imagine. And they're like, nope, we're not interested. I was like, please hear me out. And so I was in Japan and I had ramen with Mike Brown, who's one of the like the head cinematographers, and started Sweetgrass. And so him and Zach, um, yeah, agreed to it eventually. And then, sorry, let me backtrack again. Before that, my I work with my buddy Tyler Hamlet, who is a cinematographer and producer and all of these things, and he was working for Poor Boys Productions, and he was the first person I ever filmed with. So we've known each other for a very long time, and we were already working on a project together that we're still working on, about my wife. It's kind of like a more in-depth documentary thing that we could talk about later if you want. But so we were already working together, and I was like, okay, Tyler, this is all kind of happening. What would you do this with me? And he was like, okay, let's take it on. And so sold him on it, sold Atomic on the skis, sold Dakine on a backpack and mitten, and yeah, and then TGR, Brian is doing TGR's apparel, so they were doing t-shirts and hoodies and all of these things. So we kind of had this unique product capsule of all these Grateful Dead things, and then this film looming in the distance. And so I I had to pitch Mammoth on it, most importantly, because for a resort to close down for anything is a massive ordeal, and it wasn't closing the whole resort, but to close a section and just the liability and the danger of skiing avalanche terrain at night and all of these it's thousands of logistical things. It took me many meetings with Mammoth, but they also I grew up here. My parents have been here for since the '70s. My mom works for the mountain, and I the current COO was my ski race coach. It was all these things that just couldn't have happened more perfectly to help them, believe in my vision and help bring it to life. And so Mammoth Mammoth agreed, became the title sponsor of the film, and certainly was the meat and potatoes of the whole film, if you will. It was we filmed the whole night segment here on the backside of the mountain, and then then the whole Rob and Indonesia
Yeah.
Indonesia thing is a whole nother story that had a million layers. It was originally supposed to be at Kelly's wave pool, but yeah, I can let you. How about I stop talking? You can ask some ask some questions.
Well, so the one thing that I wanted to chime in and just let people know, that first of all, you can find the Fire on the Mountain on YouTube if you just type in "Fire on the Mountain." It'll come right up. But the other thing that I wanted to let people know is that, you know, the major scene in the movie is filmed at night. So when Chris is talking about all of these logistics and figuring out all of these things and trying to coordinate all of these different people and all of these different efforts and lighting and this and that, like, just understand that this is also happening at night. So if you have a chance, if it's something that you're interested in, whether you are a diehard Deadhead or just barely dabble into their music, coming from a skiing and surfing backgrounds, like you have to check it out because it's a visual journey, and it's something that's really awesome. But the concept of the film was a concept that you had before you were ever approached about the ski, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I was so inspired by that sweetgrass shoot that I did in Alaska 6 years prior that I wanted to ski at night again, and particularly wanted to do something here at my home with Mammoth. I yeah, I had actually pitched a, much smaller concept to GoPro the year prior, that kind of fell through because they were launching a new camera that had much better nighttime filming capabilities and all this stuff. But I basically had some ideas, but then bring the whole Grateful Dead side in. And when I started pitching this, of course, it stemmed from selfish reasons. I was like, oh, wait a second. I'm doing a ski with the Grateful Dead. Can I use your music? I make ski films every year, So I was like, I wonder if the Dead will let me use their music. I love their music and it would go incredibly well with skiing. And then so that just started getting the wheels turning in my brain where I was like, okay, well, maybe if I blend chasing adventure with my night concept that I had at Mammoth with Grateful Dead music and, like the whole skeleton light suits, all that stuff was came from the Grateful Dead side of things, but
Mhm.
the lights and the trippiness of it was already kind of brewing in my mind, and then so yeah, it just kind of was the perfect storm of putting it all together into one cohesive project. And it certainly morphed and changed as all projects do. Like originally going back to the chasing adventure concept, I when I originally told this to Rob, I wanted to start in Mexico and do a road trip up to Mammoth and once again surf, ski and climb and do it all at night and kind of have a uh, you know, kind of like a spiritual journey, if you will, of
Mhm.
just like a really trippy movie that kind of blended all of these things that I'm inspired by with art and music and skiing and surfing and snowboarding and climbing. So that was the initial concept, and it obviously changed to being a much more global movie because for different reasons that you can ask me about if you want. But yeah, we went to Svalbard, to almost to the North Pole. Then we went to Indonesia and Mammoth. So it was quite widespread.
And you changed the wrap on the outside of the van as well. So the original design and vinyl wrap on the outside of the van was uh for the series Chasing Adventure, but it was designed by you and Sky. And as part of this new project, you actually did another wrap of the van. And I don't know, I'll ask you, and it's like it would be like having two kids and picking a favorite, but you changed it and it's something completely new for the Fire on the Mountain project, but, which design did you like better?
Which van design you mean?
Yeah, mhm,
Yeah, I love the Grateful Dead one, obviously, because I think my art improved has is continuing to improve more. I'm
mhm,
getting more comfortable with spray paint and more, I'm since I never considered myself a real artist, for quite some time there, I never was attached to any mediums, and I was pretty open-minded to, like, push my boundaries and step out of my comfort zone, which is great as an artist. A lot of people that go to art school or find their path get really stuck in that way, and that's where Skies like really helped open my mind and pushed my art a ton. And I got to collaborate with another buddy of mine, Todd DeCurcio, who's a New York based like abstract artist. So yeah, so in that regard, I like it more just because I had learned more as an artist by the time I created it.
mhm. So you mentioned a couple times, obviously that the film had to change and there were things that were completely outside of your control that led to things changing, but there were also challenges that came up during the film. Um, Obviously, trying to light a mountain at night is a challenge, and there's wind. You're on a mountain, like there's things that are just completely out of your control. And when you went to film for Rob's part, um I'd heard that you were told and you had read that if you completely purge the generators of fuel that they would let them on the airplane. So you did that, you go, and they're like, "Yeah, those generators are not getting on this airplane." So there's all of these things that pop up along the way, and through talking with you right now and through following you, you come across as an easygoing guy, but I would have to imagine that in a situation like that, it's not as easy to just be like, "Ah, well, we can't take the generators. Whatever, we'll get on the plane. We'll figure it out when we get there." Like, how like, so what and obviously, looking back now, you can laugh at these things, but at the time, you were probably ready to, like, rip your hair out of your head. So, how did you handle these situations as they started to come up and adapt and change and still get this amazing project out there?
Yeah, I have a lot of gray hair. I think I internalize a lot of my stress probably more than because to funny enough, I did just be like, I do just figure it out in the moment, and I'm like, okay, we're going anyways. We'll figure it out. Like, I guess to to we're constantly learning about ourselves, right? Like, I do a lot of self practice and internalizing and trying to just understand living presently and what that really means and all of these things. And I think I do have the ability because a I have a pretty bad memory. A lot of it stemmed from hitting my head a number of times, but I have the ability to like really live in the moment and just kind of see whatever happens, like not getting too attached to the future or the ideas of what expectation, you know. So that serves me incredibly well in those stressful situations. And I can't say that I'm not stressed. I certainly was stressed. I was like, well, shit, this whole thing might just collapse and fall apart. But I guess we'll just go and see if that's what happens or if it's gonna work out, you know.
Mhm,
So um yeah, and I think, my wife unfortunately catches the other side where she sees my stress more, but I don't tend to show it in an outward way unless it's just in the comforts of my own home. Like I'll explain my stress to her a lot more candidly. But anyways, yeah. So to backtrack once again, like this project is a perfect example. So Sky and I paint that dead mural long before I even know that, and I wrap my van before I even know if the Grateful Dead's going to agree to the film. I'm just like going completely off manifestation and believing in the power of just creating for the sake of creating. So I'm like, okay, this might happen. So we're gonna paint a mural and wrap my van in the hopes that it does happen. And so that happens. And then I'm like, okay, we're gonna make this movie, and I'll figure out the money and the sponsors and everything after the fact. I'm just dipping into whatever personal savings I have and whatever I can get together, and asking favor after favor to all these passionate people like Tyler who made the film. I'm just like, yeah, asking all favors, basically. Anyone and everyone I know that's in the project. I'm just like, just believe me. I think it's going to work out. Just trust me. And we were on a Q&A panel with Dave Lemieux, who's the archivist, and he brought up the fact, which I forgot, but I had even edited the freaking film before I knew if Universal was even going to let us use the music. Like, there was so many layers of me just kind of diving headfirst and hopes that it would all work out. So um that being said, I approached Indonesia the same way. It was like we tried to go to Kelly's pool. We went to Kelly's pool, which was amazing. I got to surf it. Rob got me up there, and we scouted it, flew in the lighting guys. My buddy Shane Treat, who had worked with Sweetgrass, who's a very interesting human. You should probably have him on your podcast because he's a fun one to talk to. But he does hydronic heating systems for water parks, and he's an incredible skier. He's a mountaineer. He does like body retrievals on Denali, and he's just insane. But he was on the night shoot for Mammoth, which, once again, sorry, I'm jumping all over, but even the Mammoth was just letting me. We didn't even sign like liability and stuff at some point. We were just like, up until the final hour, they were just like trusting me too. They're like, okay, let's do this. But anyways, yeah. So Shane was my guy for Indo and the lighting guys, because I couldn't bring the entire Sweetgrass team again. I couldn't afford it, for one, but also I just couldn't mobilize a team that quickly for what we needed, since Kelly's pool had fallen through. And so, yeah, we test and figure out all of these shots and perspectives and ideas for the wave pool. And then WSL catches wind of it, because it's once again complicated, but KS Waveco is different than WSL, but WSL owns the actual pool. So KS Waveco was agreeing to things that WSL was not aware of. And then so once WSL became aware, they liked the idea, but they wanted to own it in their distribution platform as well. And I couldn't let them own it and all these things. So that falls through. Rob's in Indo. He's like, hey, I have this random boat trip in the Telos Islands. He's like, why do we want to film it there? And he said that completely joking. And I was like, yes, we do. That's our only that's our only option at this point. So I go for it. And then, yeah, so we, find where to rent lights, who's going to let us take lights all the way to Indonesia. So we find, through Rob, this guy Todd Heater, who works in Hollywood. He's a lighting guy, and we go to Paramount Pictures and rent all the lights and talk to him and do our research. And I call United and I call JetBlue or whoever, I can't remember the horrible airline, the Indonesian one that I ended up having another whole shit show I'll tell you about. But yeah, I call everyone. I'm like, okay, can I bring generators? Can I do this? And it's yes, if it's purged to fuel. And I look on all these like hazmat things online, and I thought I did my homework. But we get to the airport, and yeah, checking into United, they even sent a couple down to baggage, like to be retrieved. And then a supervisor comes up, as we keep checking things in, and we had 30 bags all weighing close to 100 pounds and 6 generators. And, it was just like chaos after chaos. And then the supervisor's like, wait a sec. He's like, what? I can't remember what sparked it, but you can't fly with generators, and then blah, blah, blah. So they bring them back up, and then we're like getting close to our flight time, and I called that guy Todd who rented us the stuff. It's 5 in the morning in LA. I'm like, please come curbside, just rescue these things. We're getting on the plane. I'm just gonna pay for the Wi-Fi on the plane and figure it out as we fly. So he like screeches up to the curb just in the nick of time, give him all the generators, throw them in the back of his truck. Me and Shane, everyone else is checked in. Me and Shane run, get checked in, check in the rest of things, and then just make the flight. And then that whole flight was just, I guess, as you said, pulling my hair out, like, okay, what the fuck am I going to do? I need to figure out how we're going to power these things. Luckily, Shane is MacGyver of all MacGyvers. So I had faith that, he would like wire the alternator and the battery off the boat to like, I don't know, be able to power the lights or do something. And so I'm calling this Indonesian handler, or sorry, texting with this Indonesian handler that I got contact through the Telos Island guys. And I'm like, okay, just go to the hardware store, buy any generators you can. We'll rewire them and figure them out later. Like I have faith that Shane will be able to pull it off. And so this Indonesian guy, like, searches all of Indonesia basically and finds 4 generators, all different sizes, some rented, some bought, and can't fly them to the Telos obviously on the plane. So he has to ship them on a ferry, and he can't get them on the fast ferry in time. So they go on a slow ferry. So they show up to the island 2-3 days late, and we're only there for a week. So we basically only got 2 nights of surfing filming, and sure enough, Shane had to like wire and fuse and do all these crazy things to make everything work and run off the same power, because all of our cords are rented from Paramount, and coming from the US, expecting US plugs and all of these things, and different voltage and all the things that I don't understand. But yeah, it was a headache, but it worked out, ran just as I hoped it would. And yeah, next question, I guess. I feel like I talk circles, and hopefully I'm answering your questions.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to bring up there, which you have mentioned multiple times, but you were reaching out to these people just based off of favors, like, hey, can you do this, like, and it's gonna work, like, it's gonna work out. I just have this feeling that it's gonna work out. And obviously you've built these super strong relationships with these people because they do end up trusting in you. So how, not just with this project for Fire on the Mountain, but for Chasing Adventure and anything else that you work on, ski graphics, whatever it may be, like, how important is it to you to build strong relationships with these people who then in turn are going to support you no matter what the crazy ass idea it is that you call them for, next week, next month, or next year?
I mean, relationships and that trust is everything. And I just hope, I guess, I mean, I check in and try and make sure that I'm like giving back to all of these people, and I hope everyone feels fulfilled and happy. And from what I've been told by each of these people and all of these favors they all do. But yeah, I'm just hopeful I give back to the relationship, because I certainly have asked so much of so many people, and I'm so grateful for each of those friendships that I've built. And once again, it just comes back to that authenticity and passion for what we're doing. Like, all of these people share it, whether it's my wife or Rob, or like even Machado, like, puts so many hours. Like, he is such a busy human as well, and puts so many hours into working with Shane to like glass in the lights and I drew art for the boards and like shaping specific boards and figuring out how to not electrocute ourselves and making the wetsuits and like trying all of these crazy ass ideas, and we had to try them all in such a short time frame. Yeah, a lot of people gave me a lot of their energy and time. So the relationships mean a lot to me, and I hope I hope I return the favors and can return the favors.
And so I want to move into just some random, silly questions before we kind of sign off here. Um, but the first one isn't silly, but it's just random. What is your favorite graphic to date that you designed?
Hmm. I honestly, as I kind of mentioned earlier, just learning more as an artist and improving my skills a little bit each time that I paint. I think I like my latest 120 ski. So I have a couple ski graphics, as you mentioned. I can't remember if we were on the air yet, but I have a 100 waist ski
Hmm.
and 120 millimeter waist ski, and so the newest 120 with like this Coular Old Man Winter, that I call the Peace Terminal Winds, and there's some waves in the back and all that stuff that came out. That graphic came out pretty sweet compositionally. Has some ski tours walking up the couloir, and the base came out cool, and yeah, stoked on it.
Yeah, that is a really awesome graphic. I mean, the first time that I saw it, I was like, man, I want like we were talking earlier, but I can't ski the powder ski, right? I can't ski 120 underfoot, and the graphics for the 120 are always different than the 100.
Yeah.
Um, and so I just wanted to take that 120 graphic and slap it onto a 100, which obviously I can't do that. I'm sure Atomic would probably have something to say about that as well, but yes, that graphic did really turn out. It turned out awesome. It turned out awesome. So,
Thank you so much.
which obviously, like I said earlier, it incorporates Old Man Winter, which is my absolute favorite piece that you've done. I have it framed, sitting right next to me right now. I used reclaimed wood, as a matter of fact, to create a frame for it. So,
I
definitely,
appreciate that very
yeah,
much.
definitely one of my favorite ones. So you get back to either the van or you get back to your house after skiing a day at Mammoth. You open up the fridge. What are you reaching for? It's time for an ice cold drink. You reaching for a beer? You reaching for uh
I actually I'm quite healthy, and that's funny you should ask this question. Is my wife and I invested in a company called Juneshine, which is a hard kombucha brand, and it's 100% organic alcohol. They just ferment and brew kombucha longer to give it more alcohol content essentially. And so they're a very mindful, rad company, and they make a ton of tasty flavors. And we have a lot of that in our fridge. So that's my go-to drink for sure.
so before you got back from the mountain, you were skiing, and if you had one choice, like there was only one thing that you could do just for that day, because of time constraints or whatever the case may be, are you going to ski groomers if you can't ski in the backcountry, or are you just saying, forget it, I'm just not gonna go?
I live in a pretty special place. So sadly, I ski groomers less and less because the rock climbing in Bishop is so amazing. And I'm very obsessed. So depending on what it, like if it's chalky and windblown and still fun up there, or if the park is, I can't say that I ski a lot park anymore, but I still get inspired by hitting some jumps once in a while. But yeah, it takes some nice conditions or nice snow for me to get on the mountain every single day. So I rock climb a lot as well if it's been icy and dry for a bit.
And you can't get out into the backcountry.
Yeah.
Um, Totally random question, just purely for fun. What's your DIN setting at?
I ski the STHs, which are go to a 16 DIN. I ski them just right around 15. And then the shift binding, which is the touring binding, they only go to 13. So I just max the spring out all the way to 13, which is still, I wish they would make a little bit stronger of a spring for me, because butters and things tend to put a lot of torque on bindings. So I still occasionally pop out when I don't want to.
I was going to say, for those of you who aren't listening, just as a point of reference, first, your DIN setting is what keeps your boots inside your skis. Or if you fall, that's what helps your ski pop off. So depending on your ability level, size, weight, there's tons of different factors. That's how you set your DIN setting. I'm pretty sure, given my size and ability level, I sit somewhere around like a 7.5, I want to say. So yeah, just a point of reference, Chris cranks his backcountry skis up to like a 15. So there you go.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
last but not least, just we talked a bunch about Fire on the Mountain and Chasing Adventure, so people are aware that they can find those on YouTube. But as far as for you personally, if people want to get connected with you and see a little bit more about what you're up to, where can they do that?
I do have a website. It's more focused on my art, but you can see all of my films there for the most part. All of our 10 years of Nimbus are no longer available on the internet, unfortunately, because we never had any money, so we never got music rights. So when Eric got a cease and desist at some point from Vimeo, unfortunately. But I mean, I understand it. We had no other way to pay for music for a lot of the edits. And so, yeah, movies and things and art are on my site. And then my day to day, which, yeah, is basically just Instagram. So Instagram or chrisbenchetler.com.
Right on. Well, Chris,
Yep.
thank you so much for taking the time to come hang out. I really appreciate it. Enjoyed our conversation big time, and look forward to following along and finding out what the next project is.
Likewise, thank you again for having me on, and hopefully I answered your questions and didn't talk circles around too much. But yeah, thank you.
All right, my friend, that is it. That is my interview with Chris Benchetler. And I just want to take a minute to say thank you to Chris. I know he is very, very busy. He's constantly got stuff going on. And I'm very thankful that he could carve out some time to sit down and chat with me. It was an interview that I was really excited about. And as such a fan of Chris's work, I was honored to have him on the podcast. So thank you again to Chris for doing that. Thank you to you, the listener, for coming over and checking out the podcast. If this is your first time here, I appreciate you coming over and hanging out with us. And if you're a returning listener, you know that I appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming to hang out with us. So that is all I have for this week's episode. If you can do me a favor, just leave a review. I would greatly appreciate that. And I look forward to having you back for the next episode.